we need something to happen here to sort of, whether it's move the plot along or fill space or get some information out or something. It's once I figured out what was in like I said, the original idea was the guy who's telling this story of this bank robbery from what you think is a jail cell. That and the dressing up the hostages as bank robbers. Those are the original ideas. So the next step was figuring out, okay, is he stealing money or is it something else? And it became, at some point it was just going to be money. But, then I sort of, for whatever, I can't remember the exact reason, but I decided it was going to be something smaller. And maybe it was just the logistics of it, that it fit in your pocket or whatever. But, and then it was just, okay, then what is that thing and what are the ramifications of it? And it just sort of grew, it grew from there. I mean, some of these things you know when you start, some of them you add in, and then some things just, there are some things that just happen in the script. And I'll give you my favorite example. It's the script had already been written. I mean, the whole movie was pretty much done. It's all there. And there were things in there that were just in there for the sake of themselves, like the conversation he has with the patrolman, who's a bit of a racist. He's kind of not necessarily. It's up to you to decide, but he's a New York cop with a little bit of a prejudice. He's not necessarily a bad guy, but he certainly got his, he brings with him where he comes from, and he makes a few comments that I'm trying to think. Well, it comes in the conversation when Denzel walks outside and talks to him, and he tells him he got shot by a kid. So, like that character was already there, and he had opened up that story to Denzel in the beginning. He said, "You ever had a gun pointed at you?" And he says, "Yeah." So that was there. And then later, as I'm writing sort of the end, that the scene in the end where they're going to take over the bank, and Denzel's in the MCC, the command unit, and he says, "I got to get out and get some air." And I think to myself, I thought, well, what's outside when he walks out the door? And then I just thought to myself, that cop is there. And, I hadn't created that character so he could be there. I had already created him there. He was already real. He's in the movie. And I thought, that's who's outside. And let's talk about that story. Because he's already said he had a gun pointed at him. And Denzel says, tell me about that. And the guy's like, now? He's like, yeah. He wants something to take his mind off it. So it's funny to me how the groundwork was already there unintentionally. And then what was even more bizarre and what they call organic, that it just sort of came out of the script, is as the guy tells him this story, and he says at the end of it, he says, "I'll try to watch what I say. You never know who's listening." Literally, as you see Denzel's mind think about that, I was figuring that out. I literally had written those lines, and then it hit me 8 months into this process. I said, "Oh my God, they bugged them." Now, and I mean, how that happens, I can't even explain. It's like I've written the whole thing, and then I realize that the crooks put a listening device in that drawer. All that stuff was already there. And as you see Denzel figure it out, that's how I figured it out.
That is really cool.
It's amazing. It's
But I think that is.
There should be a Nobel Prize for screenwriting.
There should be, but one of the reasons why Winnie and I like to do this class is it's like the beauty and the mystery of writing. Because just listening to Russell speak tonight, we're seeing how many things that he did that were just quite simply problem solving that led to these really interesting, the whole plot of the Nazis
Original.
with what can fit in the pocket, but then you've got the beauty of these things that you're surprising yourself, and things that you've set up that you didn't know you set up. It's like that blows your own mind, basically.
And one of the places that comes from is just time. It's just living with that story and constantly working on it and living with the characters, to the point where it just becomes real, to the point where, you step away when you turn off your computer, if anyone ever still did that, and lay down on your pillow and you're still in the story. It comes from that. It comes from that. And that was the luxury of being unemployed and not a writer, there was no, not having a deadline. I mean, I took like a year to do this, and then of course years after, because it's still 4 more, years after that. But moments like that to me are the most amazing ones, where instead of having to make up some other new thing, you look at what's already there. Yeah. And there was this thing. There were these things. There was this cop who had this unfinished story to tell, and this was that moment. It was that perfect moment. And then there was this discovery. And you know what else was there that didn't make it was he walks. There was a whole Albanian thing, and they were saying we're trying to get someone to translate. He walks out, and the cop's like, "This is so and so from the Albanian consulate. Look, they don't need this guy anymore."
It's over.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's great is he says, there was the conversation with the girl. Who's telling him what it is, and she's like, oh, that, he's dead, that horrible communist, I had to listen to it in school, it's all a bunch of crap, and then and Verhoeven was the guy who basically ran Albania from World War II into the 80s. So Denzel, and you've heard her basically put him down as a tyrant. So he says to this guy, he says, so who's Enver Hoxha? And the guy goes, they shot this, but it didn't make it any. He goes, he was a hero. He liberated my country from the Nazis. And it was so irrelevant. And I couldn't convince anyone of why it needed to be there. But it was just this great moment that he hears this completely different story.
Version of reality.
Yeah. And if you recall, when he was in the bank with Clive at the end, and the guy tells him, about money shouldn't really matter if you love each other. And I love the moment. It bugs me that the camera's moving around. It doesn't get to Denzel early enough. He's like just starting his life. He goes, thanks, bank robber. I'm learning so much today, And it's just like you feel for, because there was a little bit more of like education for him, like more things he was hearing. But I love that moment, and I really wish the camera got to him a little bit sooner. It's really dark, and you don't see all of his reaction. But when he says to the cop, to the Albanian guy, who was Enver Hoxha, he's like, oh, he liberated my country from the Nazis, and thank you. And the guy leaves, and Denzel just goes, I'm learning so much today. And it's like, because I know the audience would have been feeling the same thing, and it would have been a nice little moment.
I agree.
Jump?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Just wondering, you starting out brand new with writing a script, did you think about 3-act structures? How did you?
No.
How did that come about?
Not only didn't I think about it, I had never even heard of it. Okay, and I can't quite tell you where the act break is. Literally, I had a conversation with my pal, this now genius, Daniel,
who I love.
Yeah, and he said, well, who's the antagonist? And I said, I don't know. What's an antagonist, and why do I need one? Because it's not really a movie with a bad guy. I mean, that's something we can kind of debate, and that was actually one of the issues once it was sold and being developed. There was this need for a bad guy, and for me, Christopher Plummer is not the bad guy in this movie. First of all, he didn't plan this whole thing. He's just, to me, he's a guy who did something really, really bad 50 years ago, and he's been trying to make up for it ever since. So I don't see him as a bad guy. I don't need him to get his comeuppance at the end of the movie. The scene where where Denzel goes to the Four Seasons restaurant and Jodie's having dinner with lunch with the mayor, who doesn't, if you're following the logic of the movie, he doesn't want to be seen with her ever again. And all of a sudden they're having lunch together.
But I sort of thought that was funny.
I don't know. I didn't write it. But and the movie's already over by that time. But I didn't, they just felt like somebody had to get their just dessert. Somebody had to go down. And so the big magical solution is that Denzel tells her something about the address for the War Crimes Office of the State Department, which, by the way, has nothing to do with hunting Nazis. Okay? It's about assisting other countries in prosecuting, like, Rwandan genocide. So, whatever. But not that it matters. But what was the question? Yeah, I didn't know these things. I really didn't. I just literally, they go into the bank and blah, blah, blah. I do pay more attention to it now.
But you had an innate instinct. It's like, if you're at lunch with someone and you're cognizant of when people are kind of getting bored with your story and something has to happen, that never happens to you. But it's happened to me. I can tell you what it's like. But if you're telling a movie and you have that instinct of when something needs to happen, I don't think you need the 3-act structure.
Well, he just said that's what that's partly what inspired you to bring in Jodie Foster, is there was a nagging feeling you had that something had to change, that there needed to be a new, like a left field kind of a thing. Yeah. I mean, you basically said that.
You never really know who all the characters are. You come up with you come up with an idea for a movie, and there's usually two or three people involved in the crux of the story. And then as you sit to write it, you think, okay, how many more characters are there? I mean, there's the head of the SWAT team, and then there's the sort of second in command guy, Hernandez, and there, a lot of times, like I'll give you again, going back to Righteous Kill. Righteous Kill had two different psychiatrists. There was the police psychiatrist that both De Niro and Pacino had to go see, to talk to. And then there's another character who the cops who were looking for the killer go to consult with. And in the movie, it ended up being one psychiatrist, which doesn't make a lot of sense and certainly raises some issues that nobody cared about. But what it came down to was not just about hiring another actor, but it was also somebody wanted to play. One was male, one was female, and it was an actress who wanted to play the role, but one of the actors didn't want to work with that actress. And it was like, can we combine them into one character? And I said no, and they said fine, we'll do it. And so these things happen. Did that in any way address the question I was?
This gentleman.
Yeah, can you talk about the flash forward structure to the
Yeah. I've done that a lot, actually. The basis, it's interesting. The original script I wrote actually moved through more different time frames. It opened, and this is what I sent you. The opening scene is Denzel's character with his girlfriend, and she's bringing him breakfast in bed. And this is after he's gotten his promotion. Okay, and then he's all pissed off about it. And he goes into work, and you still see the scene. The boss hands him his plaque with his name on it that he's like made first grade, and then you go to Clive. You go back sort of to Clive in the thing, and then you go back to the robbery.
Saying the who, what, and where, like watching that as a writer, and I'm also an improviser. You're just going, brilliant. Just tell us what's going on. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was confusing. And then there was what happened was the scene where Denzel gets his promotion and he's giving his boss a hard time. He's like, well, you earned it. And he's like, well, how did you earn yours? And he tells him there's a lot of cynicism in there about cops. And his boss says, how did you earn your promotion? He says, I rescued a 12-year-old girl from a crack house. He goes, and I kept my mouth shut and did what I was told for 10 years. It was all about the politics of being a cop. And, and then he sort of leaves the office. And then you pick that scene up towards the end of the movie as he's coming out of the office. And there's more dialogue. And when they were shooting it, I realized they weren't shooting it that way. And, different look. You get a different movie from every different director. And like I said, I didn't write the movie for that director. I wrote it for me, and I wasn't worried about how they were going to direct it. I just assumed they would film exactly what I wrote, and I still feel that way. But I'll tell you what's funny is that there's a few things that I now know that Spike Lee is going to do in every movie. He's going to have what he calls his dolly shot or whatever it is, where there's a camera fixed to somebody who's sort of moving. And in our film, there's three of them. There's Clive in the cell in the opening shot, which I thought, well, that's weird because it's a real abstraction. I don't have a problem with doing that shot as long as it makes physical sense. When Denzel sort of rolls to the bank and it's a place he's actually got to go from here to there,
right?
You go, what? What's going on? And then the Christopher Plummer one's fine because he's on his desk and his desk is kind of moving in the office, and that doesn't matter because they just flash to it. And it's not a plot thing. It's not a plot element. But when Denzel sort of takes a skateboard to the front door of the bank, I think a lot of people say, well, he's always going to do that, and he's always going to have some improvisation. He's always going to have a moment where he lets his actors sit down and do their thing, and it's just that because that's what he knows. That's what he's comfortable with. When I wrote the sequel, I tried to cleverly craft scenes that would have been that if I was lucky, those were the scenes he was. I have a shot where somebody sort of moves from here to there on a stretcher in an ambulance, and I thought, what a brand! You see him from above, and you sort of float over. And I was just like, well, I hope
to feed him some stuff he might use.
I just figured it's going to happen. Let me see if I can be the one to make it happen. And then I wrote this other scene that was just some people sitting around talking, knowing full well that that's not what they were going to riff off of that, but at least that was the scene it would.
Right.
Yeah.
The opportunity.
So there was nothing crucial in there that had to be in the movie.
Right.
You know. But listen, I'm no genius. It hasn't even, it's not happening.
When I was Googling you today and reading your wiki page, and I found an article where you talked about how you had never taken a course or read a book, or like, did you buy Final Draft Pro, or did you do any of that? And if you haven't done that, is there ever a point in the process where you go, I really should read a book because I'm like,
you know what?
What was that like?
I never went to film school. I never took a class. I never read a book on screenwriting. I didn't do any of those things. I went online and I downloaded a couple of scripts, Good Will Hunting and I think Heat. And I looked at, okay, this is what a script looks like. And I at first actually started writing using Word. And you can actually tell Word how to set up different like elements, And then my buddy was like, you got to get Final Draft. It's like $100, and so I did. But I didn't even know what, I had some image in my head that Final Draft was this software that helped you make up a story. And I thought, I know that's not going to work. So that's, but but I do use it, and it is very helpful. I'll give you an anecdote that I think answers this. I got a call a few years ago, right after the movie came out, from some school film school in New York. I think it was the School of Visual Arts or something. I don't recall. They're having their like award ceremony. Their graduation is like an award ceremony, and would I present the award for screenwriting? It was like 20 blocks from my house. So I said, sure. They said, we'll send a car for you. I said, it's not necessary. I'll take a cab, And so I get there. I meet the folks, and there's this whole thing going on, and they say, listen, all you need to do is go up there and talk for 5 minutes and try and be inspiring and be funny and read the awards. So the guy in front of me presenting some other award was Matthew Modine. He was like the star. I was the second most important, I guess. Anyway, so I'm like, okay, just be inspiring. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so here's a room full of people who just spent $150,000 and 3 years, I guess, learning how to do this, and they're gonna, get some guy who didn't spend a nickel and didn't, and had a pretty easy ride. Let's face it. And I'm supposed to inspire these guys. I went to law school, and I said I should actually be speaking to a room full of lawyers because I can inspire them. I know what I would say to them.
You'll just depress these people.
Yeah, these people are going to hate me. Wait a minute. So you didn't do any of these things? I don't know. But like I said,
Do you think, because at one point in the article you said you thought that's part of what helped you be so original, is that you weren't copying anybody's?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, I came to it from a place of I know what story I want to tell. Period. I mean, I didn't know everything about it, but I knew the story. And one of the look, my attitude, like I said, was I had gotten to the point where most movies I felt were just rehashing a lot of the same stuff. And I'll give you a perfect example of that, and then if I forget my point, remind me. But
what is your point, just so I can remind you?
Just that I wanted this to feel different.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I'd seen, look, there was a hostage situation movie that had come out a year or two before. It was The Negotiator with Kevin Spacey and Samuel L. Jackson. Kevin Spacey's a great actor. Samuel L. Jackson is great when he's a bad guy. I never like him as a good guy. But, that movie was just kind of okay. It was an interesting premise. What if the hostage negotiator was the guy taking hostages, and how would you deal with that? Interesting premise. No real sort of underlying, what's it all about kind of thing. Somebody was siphoning off money from some pension fund or something, and I just thought, this is the movie. This is my sort of what not to do. Okay. And I'm not looking to knock it that badly. I went to see it, but I thought of that movie at every point. I think, okay, what's the wrong way to write this scene?
Right.
And I'll give you a little trick I use. I don't see anybody pulling out pens and paper. No. No. You got a scene you want to write. Think of one sentence or two sentences. What is this scene about? In this scene, we learn that Joe is the biggest drug dealer in the city. That's the point of this scene. Don't use any of the words in that sentence.
Right on.
Just do not let yourself. Think to yourself, what would this guy be talking to his other person about other than that? But get that point across. And that's kind of how I instinctively go about these things. I may not always stick to it.
How to reveal it without saying
Without saying it. You know, ask yourself, what does the biggest drug dealer in the city talk about when he's hanging out?
An awesome exercise. I love that exercise.
You know, once in a while when I'm reading a script, if they send me a script to rewrite and I'm going through it making little notes, sometimes I literally I draw a nose. If something is just too on the nose. You know, and I just wanted to avoid stuff like that. That was my.
I just do OTN for on the nose.
Yeah.
I can't draw a nose.
I feel like this has happened to me, and I know it's happened to you. When I'm writing something in reaction to something I really dislike that I keep seeing. You know what I mean? I mean that is definitely. I'm just saying. I think that's a very time-honored and, at least for me, helpful actually. Thing to get me started, or
is that
I am reacting to stuff I keep seeing that I have a problem with, and I'm writing my answer to that. Like I think it should be shown this way, or why can't you ever have scenes that sound like this, or that type of thing is what I'm hearing from you. And actually, Mike White, interestingly, last week was saying a very similar thing, even though you guys are so different.
I always think of it as eavesdropping, that you want to feel like you're eavesdropping on an actual conversation of what these two guys would actually say to each other. And you're right, another way to look at it is never show what the scene is about.
They already know that he's the biggest drug dealer in the city, so nobody's going to say that in this room.
Right.
So try to get a little bit,
the real
deeper.
behavior.
Yeah, and sometimes you get it. By the way, speaking of stuff like that, I just the opening scene in Inglourious Bastards. It's the German guy who's looking for the that's a 10-minute scene, and that guy won an Oscar for acting in that scene. If I had written that script word for word and handed it to a studio, they would have just thrown it out. Nobody would ever let you make a scene like that. It's 10 minutes of dialogue, of slow dialogue about one little thing. It's great, but but only a guy like Quentin Tarantino, who's got a sort of built-in audience, who nobody tells what to do, can get something like that through, because who has the freedom to do that. If I had handed in a scene like that, they'd say, come on. Takes way too long. Get to the point. It's the way it is.
Yes, you, and then we'll go to that gentleman, and then we'll go back to you, and then you, Phil Bowman, who I know personally.
Thank you, all three of you. I'm really enjoying all this reveals tonight, because you not only made a really, you had a really original ideas, and you had really great characters, and then the script got bought, but then it was rewritten. How did you and Daniel and the agent, how did you guys, when in the process, you guys basically got it to Spike Lee. Wouldn't you say that's explain that process. What?
Look, it went into this machine, this very broken machine that takes a script and says, okay, we need to do something to this now. We need to take it apart and put it back together, because everybody's trying to make their own movie. Somebody was going to ask about the video game in the. That scene has very little to do with anything, but Spike wanted to say something about violent video games. So he said, and what's really funny is if you watch the commentary, if you listen to the commentary, he says, you can't write a scene like this. It's all improv. And I thought, wait a minute, Spike, you called me up and asked me to write this scene. And I looked on my computer, and there it was. I wrote the scene. There was a few lines of improv at the end, but I did write the scene. But that's pretty high praise, I guess, if he said you can't write. Anyway.
Can I just make one comment before you move on from that scene? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to touch you like that.
No, you did. You did it just perfect.
And that, to me, what the scene was about was showing that Clive Owen was a good guy.
Yeah.
Because it was violent, but for him to say to a kid, and he's the bank robber, this is, I'm going to talk to your father about this. This is really bad. It's like saying to the audience, right when you need it to, yeah, this is actually a good guy.
Yeah.
So,
He could have let the kid go.
he could have let the,
Never really thought about it. Just.
but, yeah, but the,
But continue.
yeah, okay.
Okay. So, anyway, yeah, they bring another director on, just rewrites the crap out of it. I mean, just takes it for a ride. I can't even explain it to you. It just became so bizarre. He saw the robbery as performance art, and there's all this stuff going on that just makes no sense. And in the end, after like a year and a half, he sends and when he's gone nowhere, he's done all these different drafts, and it's not getting made, and it's just not getting. And he literally was trying to cast Eminem, Jack Black, Ice Cube. I mean, it was just he thought Jack Black could play Dalton, and how great that would be. I mean, this guy was reaching. Anyway, he sends an email to Daniel. This is a year and a half after. He goes, Daniel, who he hasn't spoken to in months and months, could you send me a copy of Russ's draft? We've saved that email because that's just. He didn't even have a copy of my script. I mean, yeah. So you go through that, and you can't believe it's happening, and you look for analogies to. If this were any other business, if this was a hospital, there'd be dead bodies everywhere. The survival rate would be 5%. Nose job, dead. But there are no examples because making movies is like nothing else. It's not like anything else. It's not, But there's a hierarchy in this business, and people, yeah, your life experience doesn't count for shit if you haven't written 10 movies for us, So the script was just dead. And I got this call. She said, I'd like to show this your script to Spike Lee. And you'd think I was still skeptical, but she'd already shown it to him anyway. And he liked it. And like a week later, I'm sitting courtside at the Knicks game with Spike Lee and Walt Frazier, and completely speechless and flabbergasted. And the Knicks lost to the Bulls by 1 point at the buzzer, which I thought was a really bad omen. Yeah, but pretty soon after that we had to. I mean, we had to pick. We made this movie. We picked it up and yeah. And we're still trying to do that again. We're still trying to do it with the second one. Yeah. Because they did the same exact thing. They had a whole new script. They spent 3 years on it.
With Spike Lee?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was even tougher because now he's sort of part of the process, and it wasn't as easy to go to him with a sort of a newer version of my script. But it's hard. It's hard to get a movie made, especially, $50 million, $60 million.
This gentleman?
So this is just a quick story thing. I've seen the movie a few times, and I'm always surprised, I think every time I see it, in the end, to see the guy in the yarmulke in the car with them. Can you just talk a little bit about what was his part of the
Could say that
robbery?
He was the inside man.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah.
That was another one of those things that I sort of came up with late in the game.
What do you mean you could say?
Well,
who was the inside man if it wasn't him?
Well, at first I think it was Dalton because he's inside the bank the whole time as he's telling the story. But then this guy, his character had already been written. I just thought, and there's a line that I don't think made it in where somebody says in one of the interviews, he's like, well, the Jewish guy, he's like, why? He says, why is it every time you get on a plane there's at least 2 of those guys? But I don't think that made it in.
Love that line.
But yeah, I just threw him in there because, flavor, New York. And then literally I'd written the whole thing, and I thought, there's one more twist that one of these people, because I spent a lot of time thinking about who you think is a hostage and who do you think is a bad guy. And then I thought, let's save one surprise for everyone at the end. But I mean, I literally came up with it very late in the process. Even when Clive knocks him down to the ground and says, you get the same treatment as everyone else, that was just organic. But it became sort of a way of making that, creating that guy's bona fides.
So when you wrote the thing about he goes, you get the same treatment as everyone else, you didn't know
that was legitimate.
But do you think it was the same kind of thinking, same kind of inner method where you're sort of going, let me use something that's already there.
Yeah.
Let me take a look at what's already there and sort of almost shake it to go, what else is in there?
Yeah.
Because that's what I notice I'm doing lately a lot is In other words, when I have the feeling like, oh, I need something, and you feel the thought is you need to bring something in from outside, but you don't. It's already there, but you're not.
Sometimes you do, but if you're lucky, you don't. I mean, I think I was sitting there writing the scene where they're in the car waiting for him to come out, and I'm thinking about who's in the car, and it just kind of hit me. Let's throw someone else in the car.
Right.
Let's throw someone who,
never think.
Yeah, and it tied in with everything else. So why not?
Great question.
You were next. And then Phil Bowman, and then Mary Jo Smith. And then Larry. I know a lot of people here.
I have a question too, but.
Oh, you do? And then Russell.
Okay. Did you have a mentor or anybody that inspired you to do your work?
Did I have someone who inspired me to do? Not well. I will say this: when I had lost faith in movies, when I was, sort of thought I'd seen it all, I saw The Usual Suspects, and that completely blew me away. I mean, I went back.
Winnie said to me, "I wonder if he was inspired by The Usual Suspects."
Oh my God! I went back to see it like a day later, and then I took my girlfriend at the time to see it a week later. I mean, I just had to keep watching it because I just thought. I mean, I'd never, and what I think is great about that kind of movie is it makes you feel smart and stupid at the same time. Smart enough that you get it, and so stupid that you missed it, and it really inspired me. And in the same year, Seven, which I thought was just that movie made me sweat. I mean, it blew me away. And so that was what inspired me. Nobody personal. But it was, the fact that, someone could actually tell a really, really good story that I didn't see I thought I knew what was coming. And, to me, Usual Suspects is still my model for how you do, if you want to call it a twist movie or whatever. And I'll give you the simple formula. There's a few rules. The movie has to be over before the twist. In other words, that movie, before you find out the big thing, you think the movie's over. You've seen a movie, you've watched a movie, you enjoyed it, it had a big climax, and it's done, and you liked it, and they're fading out, and then they hit you with this thing, and all of a sudden it was a different movie, and I mean the reaction I am always going for is the reaction I had in that film, which is very simple. I got to watch this again. I have to watch this again. That's always what I'm trying to do. So that's what inspired me. And with Seven, it was I have to watch this again in 6 months. And I literally, because I'm not going back to see this movie again next week.
Right.
Oof.
Right. Do you want to, that guy with the hat, while you're walking over there, did you see Nine Queens, that movie? It's it may be Brazilian, but it's a South American movie, and it's one of those that you're talking about. It's one of those movies, you should just watch it, because I don't want to ruin anything, but it's Nine Queens. Has anybody seen Nine Queens? It's really good.
Where's it from?
Brazil, right? Argentina.
Okay. By the way, the other.
Don't watch the American version.
I promised more than one rule. The other rule is it's not a twist if it comes out of nowhere. If it's just like, if there's no foundation for it and you're just like, oh my God, that's the killer. The key to it is there's got to be 20 different details that make this this guy the bad guy, and you have to show 19 of them in the movie.
It's hiding in plain sight.
It's just when you see the last thing that all of it clicks into place. That's what a twist is, and it's all and it's kind of about creating a misimpression. I mean, the misdirect in this movie, and I have issues with the way it was done, but when you see Clive Owen in this what you think is a jail cell, I mean, I could tell you 5 things I think are wrong with the way it was shot. It's but apparently people still you do think he's in a jail cell, and he's telling you about the perfect bank robbery, and he says, I told you I planned the perfect bank robbery. So he's telling you that he's not in jail, but you think he is, and you assume he is. Although, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know that it's a pure sort of twist kind of movie the way I kind of intended it. But, yeah. Next. Yeah. You know what's funny about that? That's one of the best ones ever, and I got robbed of my experience in that film. Well, somebody said, everyone went to see this movie.
Talking about Sixth Sense.
And I hadn't seen the movie, and someone says there's a twist at the end of the movie. And then I saw the trailer and I knew what it was because I was looking for it. And I just thought, well, that's a shame because it was so well. But yeah, all the clues are there. I mean, they show you Bruce Willis get shot at the beginning of the movie. How much more obvious can you make it?
Right.
You know.
Right.
That's why you feel at the end when you find out he's dead. That's why you feel, and I guarantee you there was, discussions back and forth. Do we need to see him get shot? Isn't that kind of going to give it away?
Well, also that he walks around saying, I see dead people.
Yeah, I mean, it's right in front of your face the whole time.
Yeah.
And to get to that's, when you have a writer-director who, one person who's guarding that whole story at once, you end up with something, that well done.
Just talking about, because we've been talking about how this was your first movie, unless I'm wrong, I remember reading in WGA magazine that it was M. Night Shyamalan's first script or one of his early scripts, and that he said this in an interview, that he did about 9 drafts before he realized that Bruce Willis was dead.
That's amazing.
And it is
I get
amazing.
it.
And I get it too. Every writer gets that. And it's just good to remember.
Yeah.
Because we forget and we think other people, it just comes out that way.
Well, that's the thing. There's 2 movies there. There's there's that movie, and then there's the movie you realize when he realizes. I mean, it amazes me that he didn't set out to write it that way.
It is. It's
incredible.
Like,
it's incredible.
Because it's gripping enough
magical.
without the twist, and I guess that's what you're saying. It's got to stand on its own without the twist, and then.
But it's the thing you were describing before in your own work.
Well, does everyone know the story of Blade Runner and Harrison Ford's character? And I don't know I may not know the whole story, but essentially, he's this guy who chases down replicants, artificial humans, and he meets what's her name, Sean Young, and she's this robot who doesn't know she's a robot, and then he's chasing Rutger Hauer, who's a robot who's almost perfectly human, and he finally catches him in the end, and then in the end when he catches him, and you're waiting, you're rooting for him to catch him the whole time, you finally realize that even though he's a robot, he's human, he has emotions, and you feel really bad about him dying. It's a very cool movie, and I loved it. And then I find out years later that there was a different ending. That on top of all that, at the end, you're supposed to find that Harrison Ford finds out that he's a robot too. Yeah. And I'm just like, that's incredible. But apparently he didn't want that ending, And it's like, what's that? Yeah. And I have very conflicted feelings about that because the movie worked for me the way it was. But as a writer, I'm really angry.
It's a stronger ending.
Because it's the movie works, but yeah, that's an amazing ending. And if I had written it and they screwed it like that, I'd be angry as hell. I'd be mad as hell. And somebody would tell me, yeah, but it's a great movie anyway. And I'd be like, what the fuck do you know?
Right on.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Is this on? Yeah. So I love this movie, and I remember when Richard Price wrote Clockers that Spike rewrote, he was kind of disappointed because it really became a Spike Lee story more than a Richard Price novel. But I thought that in a lot of ways you and Spike together elevated this from the genre because having a character, Miss White, and there's the theme of this movie, there's so much corruption in this movie that Denzel is accused of corruption, winds up vindicated. The bad guy who's robbing the bank is actually quite heroic. And it's interesting that you mentioned that you didn't really see the Chris Plummer character as being a villain because he's a money launderer for the Nazis and diamonds. And I thought that because he kept the Nazi information in the safety deposit box that he was a believer, that he somehow kept that for some sort of nostalgic reason. But so I have a question also. Prescott Bush, who was the grandfather of George W. Bush and the father
I've heard
of
people
H.W.
reference him.
He was a money launderer for the Nazis, so I was going to ask if he's the inspiration for that character.
He wasn't. I didn't know any of that. But I'll tell you something interesting. I was interviewed on the press line at the premiere of the movie, and there was a woman from a newspaper called The Forward, which is like a Jewish newspaper. I wasn't familiar with it. And she says to me, she's saying, asking me about his character, and she's saying, that he's Jewish. And I said, no, he's not Jewish. And she said, no, he is, And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I wrote the movie. I'm pretty sure he's not. And but Spike wanted him to be Jewish. That was one of the first notes he gave me. He goes, he should be Jewish. And I just thought to myself, okay, I mean, you could go that way. I knew that the studio would never allow that because they didn't even want the Nazis in it. The last thing they want is some evil Jewish guy who's a traitor because there is a bit of influence in the town. No, I just knew they weren't going to go for that. So I said, all right, whatever you want. And but I mean, he there's a plaque on his desk in his office that's got like a Star of David. To me, that's no. This guy gave a bunch of money to Jewish causes out of guilt. Out of I literally saw him as a tragic character, guy who had taken the shortcut, regretted it, made all this money, spent some of the dialogues in there. I spent the rest of my life trying to wipe it off. And there's a line. I'm getting way off, but there's a line that in Clive's voiceover where he says, "The further you run from your sins, the more tired you are. The more exhausted you are when they catch you." And I'm pretty sure I stole that from Nelson DeMille, who was like my favorite author. I've read 10 of his books, but I'm not going to go back and reread all of them looking for that line. But I think that was in there somewhere.
I thought Clive was Jewish.
I find it interesting.
Denzel's Jewish.
What I find interesting about what you say about the Christopher Plummer character is just an informal poll. How many people here thought he was the villain of the movie? Yeah. Oh, interesting. Some of you didn't. Because to me, I felt like it was obvious that he was the villain, but in order to write that character and make him interesting, he had to see his point of view. That's what made him a more interesting character.
Well, listen, I'm sorry. No, what ends up on the screen is that he's definitely kind of the villain. I'm just saying my original. I didn't. They have this scene at the end where sort of he's got to get his comeuppance. They want you to believe that Denzel's going to take him down, and I just thought, well, that's not what this movie's about. And I'm like, the same people who are trying to push that are the ones who didn't even want the Nazi story in there to begin with.
Because
because nobody cares. Now all of a sudden this guy's got to go down for something that happened 60 years ago when he's 85, and he didn't kill anyone. But
it's the complexity, and I think people are uncomfortable with gray area, with complexity, with the fact that people can simultaneously be good people and terrible people, and But he could have given the diamonds back, by the way. Mary Jo.
By the way, in the sequel, he's dead, and he gave his $600 million to charity. So, if anyone wants a little closure there, he did a good thing. In my sequel, anyway.
Yeah. I was curious if they focus grouped your movie, and if so, did it change anything?
I don't know the answer to that. You'd think I would know that, but did they test it? Yeah, they did test it. I wasn't there. I was in New York, and the last thing they were going to do was fly me out there for that. In fact, if I was in L.A., they'd have flown me to New York while they did that. So yeah, I believe they did. I never saw the raw stuff, but I don't really remember specifically what the result, how the results were. I don't know. I don't know if they focused or they just sort of test screened it or what.
We're going to do Larry. We're going to do first Larry.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
And then we'll go to you, and then we'll go to you.
We'll get everyone. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Looking back at it now, what scene do you say to yourself, that's great writing? And what scene, if you could, you would do a second pass on?
That's mine that's in there that I would
First
do another?
Scene, right.
Yeah. I'll tell you first because I know the scenes I love the most, that are scenes that literally made it in there word for word. They are the phone conversation between Denzel and Clive, their first phone conversation, where he's got this thing about, you shouldn't eavesdrop on people. And, I mean, every line is each guy topping the other, He says, is this the president of Albania? And he goes, you shouldn't eavesdrop on people. And Denzel says, I'd get used to it, pal. There's going to be a lot of privacy where you're going. And Clive takes that and says, that's right. A week from now, I'm going to be in a hot tub with 6 girls named Tiffany and Amber. And Denzel comes right back and says, yeah, it's going to be a shower with 2 guys named Jamal and Jesus. And I wrote it that way. I spent plenty of time on it, and they read it the way I wrote it, and I love it, and it works for me. And then they have another conversation where he's got this line, you don't tell me what's happening. I tell you what's going on. I give you the status update. And he says, let's just keep everyone calm. And Clive says, don't I sound calm to you? And Denzel's like, yeah, you do. And if you watch, actually, there's let's call it an homage to that in Inglourious Bastards. There's a scene where they're about to go to the meeting with the resistance, the woman in the bar in the basement. And there's the crazy serial killer who's cleaning his gun. And the other guy says, I just want to make sure everyone stays calm. And the guy goes, don't I look calm to you? And he says, yeah, you do. And I saw that and I thought, wow, I love that. I made a mark, So that's the stuff I love. The scene with Denzel and Jodie outside of the bank where the camera's pulling in and they're sort of rewrapping. I wrote every word of that. I love the way it came out. Basically, whatever I wrote, I liked. What would I have, if there's something I wrote that I would have changed?
We do.
Nothing comes to mind,
Nothing,
but maybe after maybe when I'm answering the next question.
How did you wrap up the Christopher Plummer subplot? You said it was changed. So how was it originally?
I mean, there wasn't really a wrap up to it. He gets his little dig from Jodie where she says we're using you as a reference. Like, the thing is, I don't have him telling her this whole story. In the movie he says, then there's the ring. Don't forget the ring. I took it from some family. That whole thing is like him giving away way too much information. This is a guy who's trying to keep all his secrets. And all of a sudden he tells her, oh, don't forget about this other evil thing I did. And then she says, well, great, because I'm going to screw you over. So, I had it that he was now getting a little bit screwed. He trusted her. He hired her. And now he's in her world. But I wasn't looking for any real resolution. To me, he's not really where the story is. It's about the heist for me.
But there was Dalton wasn't doing it because he was a Nazi. It was just to get the money.
There's a line in there at the end when he's voiceover. He goes, "I'm no hero. I did it for the money." So.
No, but in your original draft.
Yeah, no,
it was just a robbery.
It's a robbery. I came up with the diamonds and the Nazis because I was looking for what can he steal that nobody's going to report missing.
Gotcha.
That's how it started. And I understand that it's taken on a life of its own, and to a lot of people, it's about this hero guy who rights this wrong, and I'm fine with that. But I can't say that was the original intent. It wasn't about taking down Arthur Case and righting a wrong. It was, the guy's stealing something, and the audience has to not hate him. He can't be the bad guy. So that's how we split that difference.
Thanks. I was just curious if you could tell us how detailed your landing was, as you envisioned it before. You mentioned when you start, you always
landing.
You mentioned when you start a script, you always know where you land.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could give an example of like how detailed it was. I was surprised to learn about the car that was added at the end, and then also if you could talk about like. Last week we had Mike White here who like wrote his first draft and it got done as is. This sounded like much more of a revision process.
Yeah.
Can you talk about like how you went about just like about your writing process and revision process?
Well, I mean, some of the I'll handle that first.
Oh, sorry, to make myself clear. How much did you revise your own work?
Yeah, I mean, some of it was look. I would get all sorts of notes that I didn't really agree with. And I made the mistake of imagining that this was supposed to be some sort of collaborative process where these were suggestions and then I would give my response. And this went back and forth and back and forth. And if I got handed 20 notes and I addressed 15 of them and rebutted 5 of them, I thought that was pretty good. No. It's literally like the producers want to write the movie, So it was a battle, and when I don't do what they want, they get someone else. Oh, before I shopped it, it was just one guy who kept sending it back to me and saying, "What about this and what about that?" And God bless him, because it's like the personal trainer at the gym. He's going to make you work harder. It was kind of like that. And no, I don't have a personal trainer. But I was talking to my chef, and he. This thing just kept coming back to me, marked up, red, with questions that got frustrating at times. And I wrote my next script without all of that. I thought I could kind of do it on my own. And
wait, without all of what?
Without all of somebody
Daniel,
else telling me.
My boyfriend Daniel, my married boyfriend Daniel.
Without the questions and wait a second, this doesn't jive with this. And, okay, and when you did that, what happened then?
It ended up getting sold to Avi Lerner instead of Universal Pictures. No, it ultimately got the treatment it deserved and got revised and got smarter and got better, but it took a lot longer. That script, actually, I'm as proud of as Inside Man. I will tell you that. It just, it was not, it just wasn't made to be, it just was not handled well. That's all. when I first set out to write, you know what? It wasn't. I mean, I went through a lot of different versions of how does he get out of the bank. There was originally, for a long time, I had him sneaking out at night, like crawling across the floor really slowly so the motion detectors wouldn't notice him until he gets to the window, and then a van bursts through and he jumps in it. I was going to have him run, break out of the bank in the middle of the night at some point. And carrying a bag of money. It started out he was just gonna, I knew he was hiding in the bank. That was original. But what he was stealing and how he was leaving, I didn't have. And I certainly didn't have any Nazis. And there was, and there was no lawyer. I mean, it was he walks in with everyone else. Nobody knows who he is. He's hiding. You think he's in jail, and then he gets out somehow. And there were different. Yeah.
It feels like, listening to you too, it feels like you had such a solid premise. And I only know from my experience, it's like when you have that solid premise, that stays. And it's like everything around it moves. But it's like you can tell almost when you have something that's got a place where it is rock solid, and then you spend a million years, months, whatever it is, rewriting around that, but that sounded like it never changed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's that because I'm always working towards that big moment at the end of, oh my God, this is what you thought and this is the reality. That's non-negotiable. And to go back to Righteous Kill, because it's actually a better example, and I'm going to ruin it for anyone who hasn't seen it because I don't care because it's not worth seeing. But
it sounds like the script might be worth reading.
Well. But it starts with Robert De Niro, pretty much in the same way the Inside Man starts. He was sort of talking into a camera, and he's saying, "My name is David Fisk. I'm a cop in the NYPD, and I've killed 14 people." And throughout the film, it's him and his partner Pacino, and they're looking for this killer. And the whole time they're looking for him, you know that De Niro's the killer. And then at the end, you find out that Pacino's the killer, and De Niro was actually reading Pacino's confession into this video.
Oh.
And that was my movie. And I just thought, well, this is just fucking brilliant. It's going to blow people away when they see that. And I had the beginning and I had the ending in much, in a very similar format. And then I filled in the middle, which is an investigation. But I had what I just described to you, but I didn't even know if they were cops. I knew you had these two guys, and one of them admits to being the killer, and then it turns out it's the other guy. And then I sat down and thought, well, who are these guys? And then they ended up being cops. And then what's the movie? Oh, they're the ones who are investigating these crimes. That was secondary. All that really mattered to me was that moment at the end where you go, holy shit. The whole time I'm watching this movie, I thought this guy was the killer because I believed what he was saying. And then somebody threw the phrase at me, the expression false narrator. And I thought, oh, I never heard of that. But yeah, that's what it is. I thought I'd invented it.
The false, that's different than the unreliable, right? Yeah.
Unreliable narrative. Yeah.
It's the same,
like Kevin Spacey in Usual Suspects.
Murder of Roger Ackroyd, if you know that, Agatha Christie.
Yeah, the two things people throw at me is Agatha Christie and Hitchcock, and I've never seen any of them, so I don't. It's like Rear Window.
I literally, because I love con movies and heist movies, I probably have a whole list of them. Nine Queens is one of them, but that are, and for that matter, The Sting is one. Where that was kind of a cheat, like you're told everything except, the most important thing. Yeah. But I actually liked being outsmarted.
Yeah,
I really do. I like being able to follow it to a certain degree. I like being able to sit with being confused. I like going, oh, I figured it out, and then, oh, I didn't. It's just so pleasurable.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's the same pleasure that you have. It's like I'm writing this whole movie so I can write this scene I want to write.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. And the reason I mentioned Righteous Kill is that when it was before it sold and I had sent it to people to read this, somebody read it, a producer, and said, listen, we like the script. Do you need the twist at the end? And I just thought, I mean, yeah. I mean, what's your movie about?
Yeah.
It's
just your knock-knock joke. We're coming.
Yeah,
we've come
exactly.
full circle.
I did want to also say, just while I'm thinking of it, the notes, which actually the studio notes with all the names crossed off.
Should we read those? Should we look at them? You have them?
Yeah, everybody has them. But one of the things that I loved about those notes was they painstakingly explain the notes. And then in case you're too stupid to figure it out, they have the pages in addition with stuff crossed out, and 90% of them are film cuts.
Yeah.
So you could shoot them and just cut them out in the editing room, and it's like it's one thing to drop a whole scene, but to like literally not have people say some dialogue that you can lift out when you may love that dialogue, it was insane.
Well, I mean, it's better.
Do you want a copy of the notes? Thank
let's
you,
have a look.
Stephanie.
Let's have a look. You know, I tried to find something that would be interesting. I said in my email, I didn't have the script that necessarily went exactly with, that they were talking about.
Oh my God, they hated
Madrugada check cashing.
They were like, you
avoid
have
saying
to take this
Madrugada
out.
check
We are
cashing?
just adamant about it. They mention it like 3 times.
Because in real life, everything's always easy to say.
Yeah.
It's a bit wooden to say Madrugada check cashing. We come to understand the details soon enough. Can we just refer to it as the Madrugada thing and save some of the details for later? Yeah. And
then again, can we avoid saying Madrugada check
page 51 again.
You're like obsessed with it.
Yeah. Do we need this?
Change this? Do we need this?
Are we sure we want to go with such and such?
It's like the world's most passive-aggressive document. Just say it. Just ask for it. It's like the scene in Diner. If you want the sandwich, just ask for the fucking sandwich.
Yeah.
Say you want the sandwich.
Well, listen. Every meeting and every discussion in the town starts with "We love the script. We wouldn't change a thing."
Do we need
if
scene
we
79?
did change something, listen. I'm not saying these are all bad, but I thought there must be some examples of stuff that they wanted to cut that ended up being good. Now that it's Denzel, in other words, now that we've cast Denzel, who's African American, would Well, no, but that's what their point was.
Okay.
Would he still talk about wishing he could eat at a restaurant other than Italian? Black people don't eat Italian. My joke was actually that Italian restaurants are owned by the mob and cops eat for free. That was. So that was what I was thinking.
But they also, one of the things that I love in general in a thriller or a heist movie is humor and laughs. It makes the tension, it relieves the tension for that minute, so that when the tension happens again, it also makes it feel more real. And when you go through this, they're like, too funny, too comedy routine. Mm-hmm. Take the joke out. Yes, you have a question?
No, I was just going to say it seems like a lot of what they wanted to take out was the comedy, which I thought you did so well, because you'd have like this really tense scene and then be the cops walking away having that real
I mean, I think that's what life is like. People make jokes at inappropriate times.
Did you have to fight for that? And if so, how did you do that?
It was tough. I mean, I made a few enemies. When I learned the hang of it, I would go to Spike and I would say, I would try to convince him we need to keep this line and hope that he would go to the mat. The first page, it says, page 49, the exchange between Miller is Frazier, by the way. Miller and Mitchell at the bottom. $5, Tijuana, don't ask. Where he says, the last time I had my prick pulled, that could have cost me $5. And they say, feels too much like a comedy team. Can we lose it? I mean, we kept it, and it's a good, I think it's a good laugh.
It just makes it seem real.
Yeah.
It's like otherwise, like cops are just
people.
Cops are like, we don't make jokes.
My attitude about characters is that these people are only their job 8 hours a day, and there's another 16 hours in a day. So none of us are really our job. We're always someone else who has to go to work. So I write that character. I write that guy. I think of it as your job. You don't live your job. It's not about every cop is some hero who was born to uphold the law. No, they're not.
Do you think that's true if you're a writer?
Oh.
If you live your job 8 hours a day.
I mean, if you ask Francis Ford Coppola.
It's not true as a writer.
Oh, I don't think so. I never feel like I'm not a writer.
Francis Ford Coppola what his passion is. It's making wine. Yeah. Go figure. So nobody, people are not their
But you
job.
wouldn't have asked him that when he was making The Godfather.
No.
Yeah. It was later that his passion was wine.
That's what gives people dimension.
But I think it's also so on target, as this young lady was saying, because I mean, I know I used to, a long time ago, my boyfriend of then was an intern at a hospital that had a lot of, where people came in with gunshot wounds, and there was a lot of mayhem. And when people are in situations like that, like cops or, in life and death struggle, people they cling to humor. They need their humor.
Yeah.
And, gallows humor, and it's absolutely more needed. It's almost compulsive with people like that. So I thought
you'll notice if
right
you read
target.
this, there's a lot of there's a let's see. Yeah, is Dalton's question when Dalton asks Frasier, "What are you too young to get married?" They're asking, is that a holdover or is it intended as a joke? Because Denzel's 50. No, it's a joke. He's kidding.
Right. Is that a holdover?
Yeah, I mean, was it silly? Listen, it's a fair question. I mean, they're asking because they're not sure. It's okay. But you'll see a lot of this is, does this line make our character seem less intelligent, less informed, less cool? There's always this focus on everybody being as smart and as cool as possible.
Exemplary.
Yeah, and that's not the way people are. People
well,
fart,
it also takes the tension out of it. If you really want tension, everybody's got to have like a little human flaw, failing. Then we can relate to them. It's like, oh my God, what if I fuck this up and I'm in charge of all these hostages? Or, just make them more human. Yes. Did you have a question? No. Well,
let's just be clear. I didn't call them idiots.
First of all, do we need it to everything to run?
So why is he talking to a skull?
Yeah, really.
Right. Well, you can question. I mean, what's?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can question any. One of the things that drives me crazy about this is that thing that we were talking about before, which is that very often, once you're really into it, when you've gotten past a certain stage of it, your subconscious supplies some stuff, which really works out well. And the stuff that comes out of your subconscious is very hard to defend. In other words, like we were asking you, where did you get that idea of Jodie Foster's character? And you're like, let me go back. Where did that come from? You were just in a place where your subconscious started to supply things you needed, right? Yeah. From kind of a deep place. And what drives me crazy is when I'm having one of those kind of conversations with the 8 pages of the questions, the passive-aggressive questions, the problem for me is I really can't answer the questions too well, and I sort of look like an idiot.
Well, that's the thing. That you can't. There's not always a perfect answer for some of this stuff.
I like it. I want it.
But I just know it came to me because thank God these things come to me sometimes, and I know it's going to be good. Like how do you say that as an answer?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like it's the same thing as like, is this going to be funny?
It's too funny.
Page 99.
Yeah, always a cautionary tale. Don't be too funny.
Page 99. The scene with Borova that's the Albanian consulate guy, seems to interrupt the great reveal of the fake robbery. Do we need it? Miller's jokey tone also seems inappropriate. Well, they won that one because they cut the scene. And I thought it was a perfect moment of, I mean, a lot of police work is waiting and standing around waiting for shit to happen. And I wanted to show that. I'll tell you another weird, horrible thing. There's that cool reveal that I love that the bad guys have bugged the cops and they've been listening the whole time. And, Denzel figures it out and he gets on the mic and he says they had a transmitter in the thing. They bugged us. They heard everything we said. They put that in the trailer. And I see the trailer. I get a copy of the trailer and there's Denzel going, they bugged us. And I'm just like, are they kidding me? I mean, and I sent that up the chain, and the word that came back was, we like the trailer. They think the trailer's great. Never mind that it's like telling you one of these big, it's giving away one of these great. The truth is, once, you've been sitting in the theater for 2 hours, you don't always remember all these things. And it didn't really hurt anybody's, viewing of it. But at the time, I thought, does that really need to be in the trailer? I mean, take it out. It's,
I think
these guys are so safe.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. I think a bigger picture, and I know we have to wrap up, but a bigger picture thing for me that comes up in that story, and that I think is a good question to ask you is, how do you have personal things that you sort of rely on to help you kind of, because what I notice is you have to really be committed completely and care as much as you care. And yet you have to live through all of that stuff that you're just describing. Because that's the game. I mean, it's that thing of, I'm going to quit the business. And it's like nobody notices, I mean, it's like, how do you walk that balance between caring as much as we do and, and there's no real answer maybe, but.
The answer to me is if it's my spec script, I care, and I'm not going to stop caring. And if it's a job that someone hires me to adapt their book, I won't care. I'll try not to care. That's where I do it. And I've only done, I've had a few specs, and only 2 that got, bought and made. And I've had a few assignments. I adapted a book, and I did some, none of them that ever. I actually wrote one of the early drafts of The Tower Heist. They had 4 different scripts. I was number 2. I got passionate about that because even though it was their setup, I, kind of basically came up with my whole story, and I thought it was really good. So I was a little more emotionally involved in it than, maybe I should have been. But it's not easy. There's no answer, because if you think something works, it's like, go back to the example of the hospital and the doctor. I mean, if you think that you need to suture this artery or the guy's going to die, you're going to argue for that, if it's because you want it to work.
Passionately.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you know what? Here's the difference between a successful movie and a flop. In a flop, everybody walks away, hating each other and saying really horrible things about each other. And in a hit, everybody walks away hating each other and saying really nice things about each other.
To go back to that Romeo and Michelle thing, I called it a memory chip. Like the guy who was the president of Touchstone, he was the one who fired me off the movie. He kept wanting a different movie. He wanted, as he kept referencing, the brilliant Night at the Roxbury. And then I come back to the movie, and he never got the movie. And then the movie did well, and he had a new memory chip.
Yeah.
I got a lot of hugs when I saw him. It was just like a whole other thing.
Remember No Way Out with Kevin Costner?
Yeah.
Okay, so I spoke to
movie.
Roger Donaldson, who directed. It's
also
a great
Sean
movie.
Young.
So, yeah, and one of the greatest twists ever. I mean, it's a fantastic twist. So he tells me that Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the president of whatever at the time, didn't want the twist at the end. And he says to Roger, and he's to this day, whatever, afterwards said to Roger Donaldson, without that twist, we'd have made more money. I mean, how do you, it's a great twist.
Well, and it's like there's no movie without that.
There's a good movie without it, not a great movie.
But it goes to what you were saying. There's got to be a movie that stands alone.
Yeah. And
from the twist, and then you've got to see, this makes sense. Should we take one more, or are we done? Yes, this.
Hey, well, I wanted to know what you're working on now, and if you'd maybe thought of directing yourself Inside Man 2, because it sounds like you have a lot of ideas visually.
I would be happy to direct Inside Man 2. I just need $60 million, Denzel Washington, Jodie Foster, and Clive Owen. Yeah, I'm right there, but that ain't gonna happen. I would love to direct. It's not easy. I mean, I don't think. Look, let me put it this way. On Righteous Kill, if somebody had shot the director the day we started filming and I stepped in and directed the movie, it's a hypothetical.
The question is, would it have been a Righteous Kill?
If he'd slipped on a banana peel and couldn't direct the movie, I would have done a better job because I knew what the story was, But there's a lot about directing. All I know about it is protecting my story. I don't, I may not know how to talk to actors, and I may not know what everyone else's job on the set is and how to make sure they're all doing it. I mean, there's a million things about directing that are easy to screw up. I think a director wears, 10 different hats, and there's only one of them that I know that I'm really good at. I don't, I may not know where to put a camera. So I don't know. But when it would be nice. Look, I have the perfect example, Spike Lee. I mean, the guy directed, wrote, and starred in his own film, and look where it got him. I mean, it's phenomenal. That would be great. That's a big commitment, and that may not be easy to do. But I would love to wear that hat so that I could protect my story more. That would be nice. Yeah.
And she wanted to know what you were working on now.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff. I mean, I have 2 other spec scripts that are both sort of, hopefully a better version of a movie you've already seen. One's kind of a road movie, like a midnight run, sort of, a little elevated, and one is a back to the inside man sort of a thing. It's a story of an assassin who's sort of telling you about his greatest job ever. And one I'm just finishing, and one I'm finishing rewriting. And I just finished a half-hour comedy for Fox a few months ago. Wow. I sold them I can be funny too. I walked in and I said, I want to. Funny all night, and the movie was funny. There you go. No, I wanted to write last year I wrote a half-hour comedy about a bunch of school teachers in an elementary school. And I just wanted to sort of peel back the curtain and see what kind of broken people these were who we were dropping our kids off with. And Fox really liked it, couldn't put it on the air, but they wanted us to bring them something else. So I basically brought them the same script with cops, And I said, look, here's the pitch. It's the same story, same guys, but now they're cops. And they said, we love it. And they paid me, and I wrote it, but they said we can't put it on the air, And so I just finished that a few months ago, and whatever. I had a meeting last week where they met with a bunch of writers. This French video game company who was looking for somebody to make a movie out of one of their, what they call a first-person shooter. You get that? It's like the whole thing is through the gun sight. Apparently, there's a story. Nobody knows what it is.
Let us shoot that guy.
Yeah, I will not get hired for that job. I can tell you. I'm working on it, trying to figure out what the story is. But there'll be a million things about my pitch that's not perfect.
That vacation house is not worth it.
Well, it would help me pay for the house I'm already living in. Actually, it wouldn't be so bad. But I won't get the job. I know that. I'll try.
You had another question?
And then we're gonna go.
I was actually just going to ask how much your legal background has played into having an understanding of all those processes, and how much you actually have had to delve into researching it, and if so, what kinds of things you've done.
I don't worry about research anymore. I think people maybe put a little too much emphasis on that sometimes as an excuse for procrastinating. Just write the movie already. But these days research is just easy. I mean, you just Google everything. You either know these people or you don't. You're not. Research isn't gonna. A ride along with cops. I mean, I've never had a ride along with cops. I just know who they are. So, wait, say the question again. Legal background. Yeah. You know what? My legal background made me who I am. My legal education made me who I am. It's not about directly applying it to what I write. It's not about, sort of John Grisham, was he a lawyer? I think he was. Yeah, it's not like that for me, but law school was very formative for me, and that was the first time I actually wrote anything that was halfway decent. I still, I was always actually more of a math guy in school. My major in college was computer science.
You're still working puzzles.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. There's a lot of lawyers who become writers because they have a lot in common. You have the world, and then you have to bend the facts the way you want them to make your point. Not every lawyer, but certainly, litigators or constitutional guys or whatever. It's certainly, it's a good education for just about anything. So I always think America needs more law school graduates and less lawyers.
Guys, thank you so much. Thank you, Russell.
Good work.
So much. You're welcome. Thank you.
Amazing.
That was wonderful.
That was great.
I did too. I got so much out of it. Some things you said.
But this audience, what a bunch of losers. I'm sorry. Sure.
Sure. All right, thank you, Russell. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, I'll see you next week.
Next week, and for week 7.
Okay,
oh,
good.
Dear.
What's your name?
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Did we get that?
I'm one of those guys you love to hate the story.
I'm here for the whole series.
I also write. I heard about it. About 3,400 scripts.
Oh.
Well, only 15 of them have been any good. I'm serious. Like I was a final analyst on Babel and Michael Clayton.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Clayton, because it was an old story. But that twist that you were talking about, you saw my movie. Well, that twist where he was in the breezeway and he sticks into the female lawyer. That's the thing that I said, okay, fine. Put it through. So listen, I appreciate your time.
Yeah. But anyway, I remember telling you that